This is why I don't own plants, because this is what happens when I try and look after a plant. This is a cactus. Yeah. Really, really, really. Hello. Hello and welcome back to Miss Finance. I'm Rebecca, and on this channel I go through all things accounting, finance and investor related. So if you do find this sort of thing useful, do consider subscribing, as it does help the channel grow and it helps it to get out to more students as a free resource. So in today's video I thought I'd talk to you about what it's like in your very first week of working in accounting. And I'm going to talk specifically about working in a practice as opposed to working in industry. So let's get straight to it. If you're not used to working in an office environment, it can be quite daunting sometimes, because you find, especially if you're working in one of these top 5 or top 10 accountancy firms, that you're walking into an office that is quite a few square feet. And I mean, you're talking about an entire floor of an office in the centre of Manchester, with 300 staff on one floor. No word of a lie. But only ever one set of toilets per floor. 4 cubicles. 300 plus people. I never have any windows in there, but we're going off tangent. Anyway, so it can be quite daunting sometimes when you're walking to your desk, and specifically if, like most juniors, your desk is at the far end of a room where you've got to walk the entire length of the room to get to the toilet, or the entire length of the room to get to the kitchen, and yet you're expected to be the one to make drinks for everybody. It happens. So if you're somebody who's got very little confidence, that can be daunting in itself, just walking past all these people that you have no idea who they are, nobody saying hello because they're all stuck in the work that they're doing. And yeah, it can be quite just trying to get a brew and get out of the kitchen fast so I can get back to my desk. So you got 2 different scenarios. So you've got this scenario where you're working in the top 10 firm, and what you'll find in the first week is that you'll probably be directed to an intranet site where you've got to go ahead and watch a load of videos, read through a load of documents, get those signed and sent off to HR. So that usually takes anywhere from a day to 2 days to sign off all of your computer hardware. You might get a mobile phone, which is always an added bonus. What they tend to do is, if you're a new starter, they'll send you off after that point, or even before you even get to this point, for potentially up to a week of introduction training. And what they'll do is they'll sit you down into an office or quite a large classroom with other individuals who are new trainees from across the business. So if you're working at a firm in, say, Liverpool, Manchester, or even London, then they might have individuals from Scotland, Sheffield, Manchester, Liverpool, all the different offices coming into just one place at once and undertaking this training. So if that training is not undertaken where you are, you might have to go ahead and travel there. But it's good because it means that you get to meet a lot of different people from the other offices and build that initial relationship with them. I know that they're sort of going through the same thing that you are at your level. So these will be people who are just starting their ACA, ACCA. They might be graduates who've just come straight from university, or they might be individuals who've completed their AAT and already have a little bit of understanding about accounting. What might happen after you get past this initial training and the signing of your computer hardware, etc., is that you might be put onto either audit or accounts, or even both. But you'll be assigned a manager who the majority of your work will come from. So they might have, again, a client base made up of a lot of different companies. So the first job that you might be given on a particular client might be to look at prepayments and accruals for the year, because it doesn't take a whole lot of understanding of that particular business to understand prepayments and accruals. So you might be expected to go through their books and work out if there are any prepayments or accruals, and have a look at the schedules. Where's the fun in doing what you're told? But one thing you'll find is that the level of teaching is very different company to company. So in a top firm, you might be shown the prepayments and accrual schedules, but you won't be told exactly how to work those out, etc. You'll have to look at prior years and make sure that what you're calculating is correct, and it will be sort of off your own back. They'll expect that from you. Whereas if you work again in a smaller firm, they might give you a little bit more detailed training. So they might sit with you for a longer period of time and then let you go off on your own for a little bit and then come back to that and review that information with you. Whereas again in a top firm, they might go ahead and expect you just to do that, and in a day's time or so they might review that with you, or they might just review that information themselves and give you feedback just due to timing of jobs and
Control.
Now, I think one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is that depending on where you work and depending on the clients that you have, they'll be using different accounting systems. So you might have some clients that use the like of Sage, Sage 50, Sage 200, Sage Cloud. They might use Xero, they might use QuickBooks, they might use Caseware or a bespoke system, depending on the size of the company and the complexities of the company and specifically what they're doing. So if they're a manufacturing business or, you know, a cake designing business, for example, they're going to have very different types of software that they use to record their transactions. So definitely I'd say again in your first week of accounting and the first month of accounting is that you might not have seen these systems before, and so you might have never used Sage before, you might have never used QuickBooks before, and by no means do they expect you to be an expert unless you've gone into a job where they've specified that's required and you've said you are an expert. That won't be good. But otherwise, they will show you how to use those systems. So you might, for example, understand exactly how to post a journal for a bank transaction, let's say, but you might not know how to do that on that particular system. So somebody will be there to show you. And a lot of cases that I found is that there tends to be somebody in that company or in that office who tends to be like a specialist with that particular software. So you might have people who are QuickBooks specialists or experts that might actually advise those clients on how to use QuickBooks and might act as an additional service to just preparing their accounts for them. You might have an expert in Sage, or one of the other systems. And a lot of the time, if you work in one of these bigger firms, they might send you on training in the year on the likes of Sage, or they might get somebody in so that they can teach, say, 50 to 100 people at one time. But either way, you're not just expected to know. Now, the other thing that you may not have thought about, you might have something in place called hot desking. So what hot desking is where you don't actually have your own desk. So you might come in for that day and you might be assigned a desk, but that's not your desk. So you can't put your belongings down, your pictures, your stationery, etc. because that desk might be hired out to another individual the next day. And even you might be working in an office where on one day you're working at this desk and then on Tuesday you're working at another desk. Whereas again, if you work for one of these smaller firms, you most likely will have your own desk. And I find that it's quite a touchy subject with accountants when it comes to your own space and your own desk. So if you work on somebody else's desk for the day when they're not there and you are just their chair, prepare for World War III. Don't go doing that. So tip to all new accounting students, do not touch people's chairs. If it's set a certain way, do not make it go up and down, do not make the back go forward and back, because you'll never hear the end of it. Now, if you are hard desk, you might have your individual phone number assigned to you by the company. So a lot of the times they'll have a telephone on the desk that you can dial into. So you'll be given a certain code for you and you'll put that number in so that individuals can contact you directly. Whether you're centred in one office but you work in another office altogether, or you're just hot desking for the day somewhere in the office that you work in, you can do this so that individuals can get in contact with you, which is something again you might not see in a smaller firm. Now, another tip, if you are just starting out in accounting and you've got your first job in practice, is ask. So if you're unsure of something, ask away. It doesn't matter if you think the question is stupid, it doesn't matter if you've asked the question before, ask, because they will be expecting you to ask. Students who fall down are those who are too afraid to ask and then end up doing something wrong, and then the manager has to spend all hours of the day unpicking what you've done and then doing it correctly, and they won't like that. So it's better if you're at a sticking point in whatever you're doing, doesn't matter if you're halfway through it or 3/4 of the way, or you've just started and they've already given you that information but you haven't quite taken it on board, or you thought you did, and you get to the task and you think, then it's best to just ask, even if they need to explain that to you again in a different way, or they just need to go over it just that one more time, or you need to write down notes a little bit better. Just ask away, because it's better to ask when you're at the junior level than get to a senior level and not understand what you're doing, but be expected to because you're a senior by that point. And I'd say always keep a notebook so that when you are asking these questions, you can write down the advice or the information that you're given. And another thing, pet hate, not by me, but by a lot of seniors, is a junior who turns up without pen and paper. Oh my word. Is that frustrating? Because it kind of gives off the impression that you don't really care, that you're not really there to learn, when you definitely are there to learn. So I'd say day one, take your own calculator, and I know a lot of things can be calculated by Excel these days and by the number pad, but take your own calculator, take your own pen and paper, and show up 5 to 10 minutes before you are due to start. So I hope you found all of this useful. Do consider subscribing as always, and I shall see you on the next video.